Hey guys, you're watching Production Tips. This is Ben Schultz, also known to the music world as The Fledgling, and we are in part 7 of 7 today in the Deer in the Headlights tutorial series. If you haven't already, please go take a look at parts 1 through 6, or if you're feeling brave and adventurous, I still encourage you, go, leave this video now and take a look at least the last video, because I believe anyone would be foolish to jump in at this point. That being said, today we're going to cover some equalization. I'm going to kind of finish that thought I began last video. I will then go over the many and various changes I've done to this mix in between the last video and now, because I did change a bunch of things and I owe it to you to explain what I've done. And at the end of this video, I'll also have some closing remarks and give you a pile of information you can use to further your mixing and audio endeavors. This is a long road if you choose to travel. It's a long road to do it, but it's a very rewarding and fascinating field to get into. So that being said, let's jump right in here. I've picked out, you'll notice the screen looks a lot different than it has in the past, and I've picked out the synthesizer section in this mix and kind of pulled out from the four corners of the world what this looks like. And I believe the synth section represents the meat of this demo in the Deer in the Headlights. So starting with the bass synth and moving clockwise, we're moving upwards through the frequency spectrum. So here's the lows, here are the mids, here are the highs. And as a general theme, you'll notice I've chopped off anything below 50 hertz generally and just left it. And the reason for that is it's a good habit to start with when you're getting into EQ, and this is a good thing to get your feet wet as well. If you get into the habit of just chopping out frequencies you don't need, start with the bass. The bass generally has way more energy than the mids and the highs do, and its energy builds up way easier than the mids and the highs do. So it's a good habit to start chopping off frequencies, and to start, you can start with the bass. And the reason for this is if you compare a mix that has been chopped off like this with one that hasn't, and that's the only change that has been done, the one that has will sound clearer and crisper and not so muddy. And I think you'll learn to appreciate this with an audio example. So I'm going to quickly bypass all of these EQs and play the main synth section, if I can find my little playhead here, and play from here, first bypassing all of these and then enabling them one at a time, and I'll commend the results to you. So let's take a listen. So you can already, amidst the other changes I've done, and I shall get into those later, the EQ really helps shape the sound. There's no extraneous bass to get into the way. It's really, really quite clear. Apart from that rule, you'll notice I've rolled off more frequencies that I didn't need as we go upwards towards the frequency section. And this leads into my other point about EQ, which is pick a frequency with an instrument and make sure it's really good at it. And so, for example, the mids, I wanted to emphasize the middle frequencies, the mid to high frequencies, so I boosted those and left the highs alone. With the lead instrument, I've attenuated the mids and boosted the really highs and kind of attenuated the mids a little too. So as you can see here, we've killed two birds with one stone, I guess, in chopping down excess bass energy, and we've also included some carving out of the frequency range to let other instruments shine through. So you'll notice after that short demo, this track has sounded very different than it has, and I'm going to go over briefly what I've done as a change. I'll start from the top here. So here's what I've done in the meantime. I've changed the piano. The plugin is still the same. I'm using the same instrument, but I've changed what I've done with it. I've made these notes a little softer to emphasize the downbeats, so this note and this note are the loudest. And then I've also nixed the reverb in favor of the sustain pedal. And I played around with Hyperdraw and figured out I could do this sustain pedal here as well. And that's on through the whole thing, and it makes it sound very smooth and shagadelic. I've also fiddled a little bit with the equalization, adding a little 5 kilohertz energy, and I discovered that wasn't quite enough. And if I did this, I did try it, and I boosted this up farther than it is now, and I realized it didn't sound that good. So what I did was I cheated a little bit, I guess you could say, and I added some harmonics in the 5 kilohertz range. And this is a wonderful tool. This is called an exciter in Logic, and I really haven't seen its equivalent on other platforms, although I haven't really been around other platforms that much. But what the exciter does is it does exactly what it says. It excites the signal, and it adds some high frequencies without making the instrument sound shrill. So I picked that 5 kilohertz range because I know that's what I want. I fiddled around with the EQ, and I discovered that's what I need more of, and so I've added more substance to it. So this works in conjunction with the EQ to perform a wonderful frequency overview of the piano. And to demonstrate this fact, I shall quickly A-B this. So here is the track without EQ and exciter, and then I'm going to switch them on and you make the judgment. Already you can hear it's punchier, it's louder, it's wonderful. It's not so muddy. So I fiddled around with the compressed percussion a lot. I carved out anything except the 2 kilohertz range and kind of boosted the highs here. And I got away with this because this is more of an effect track as anything else. I wanted to go for the feel of you're starting out playing a record and then it kind of explodes into a full frequency shift right here. Kind of what Adam did. Actually, exactly what Adam did in the above track. Moving on, the main percussion. I don't think I EQ'd this differently, but I have added reverb. This is a fun plugin. This is called Space Designer, and as much as it sounds like something from the Jetsons, it's a really neat thing you can use in audio. What this does is it takes files that represent different rooms, and how people went about this is they went into a chapel, for example, that has a nice long reverb, and they either popped a balloon or done a sine wave sweep through all the frequency, or they played a snare drum, something with a lot of frequency range, and recorded that. Then, through a lot of complicated, convoluted math, they removed the snare hit from the recording and just left the room's response. This means that we can use these files in Space Designer to perform very, very lifelike reverb and make it sound not so designed, if you will. Logic does come with reverb plugins you can use, like Goldverb. You can actually model your room and define everything about it. I don't like those as much as Space Designer, so I've added Space Designer as a reverb to help define some three-dimensional space in the room. So here it is without and with. Whoop. I've also boosted the high frequencies of the cymbals in Ultrabeat as well. And you can do this through, let's see here. Here you go. The EQ section. Right in Ultrabeat here, to make them sound clearer. I've also, to close with this, I've also, besides EQing the guts out of the synth section, I've also added a little bit of reverb to each of them. And I did this with Ascend. I wanted all the synths to be in kind of the same general room, and it didn't need to be as professional, so I just modeled a room using the simplest reverberation plugin Logic has, called Averb, and I boosted the mix all the way up to 100%, so it's only playing the reverbed signal. And then I bust it through and added a different amount of send for each one, how much it uses the reverb. So I've also added another one to the bass for effect. It kind of adds to the stereo field, and I've also taken away the unison, the chorus, I guess you could call it, and so this takes away the brain sucking out of head feeling and kind of leaves you with a better stereo image as a whole. And so in addition to that, I've also boosted the highs of the strings as well to make them stand out more, and I've also what else did I do? Oh yeah, I balanced out the gain of each of these to make them sound more balanced. I boosted the bass, the fat bass synthesizer up really more than it used to be, and so this leaves you with a very complete sounding project. The last thing I did was add, kind of simulate a mastering environment here, is to make this comparison more fair. Now we're on even ground. I took an EQ plugin and I attenuated the 2K and left some bass out as well. I chopped that down, and I also boosted the high frequencies. And I'm going to play the whole track. In the middle, I'm going to switch into the channel EQ and just turn that on to help you see what this does. And even though it doesn't look like it does much, it really impacts the whole mix, and it really provides a nice overlay. So here it is without and with. So it's a good practice to get into if you want to hear what a mastering engineer might do. You can put these plugins in and kind of tweak them yourselves, but it is generally a good idea to let another person master your songs, because they have a different set of ears and they're not kind of biased towards your own sound. They have a fresh set of brains, a fresh set of ears, so that it can make your sound really magnificent. That's it for the tutorial section. Now I'm going to go into some resources, and I will begin illustriously with my own page here. The clickable link is on the screen, and you can peruse this yourself. I have books I use and websites I visited have all been very helpful in my discoveries with music. I'll leave that to your perusal. In the meantime, I'd like to highlight a few things within that. The first is, or both are in Propellerheads' website, and the first is in their Record University section. And this is a really good primer for getting into audio, and the equalization part I found is especially informational. This has two parts, and Ernie has done an excellent job in explaining the basics from the ground up, and he's provided working demos for each of his examples, and you can play those files on the page as you encounter them. But he really opens up the doors for equalization and uses it not so much as a tone sculpting tool like I have, but he uses it more to make instruments sit better in the mix. And that's another excellent thing you can do with EQ. So I commend this page to you as well. I also want to shuttle over to Music Making Month, the page on Propellerheads. You can get to it by either clicking the clickable link on the screen, or you can go to propellerheads.se/mmm. This is a cool event. Propellerheads has this each year in May. Music Making Month is in May, and in this particular video, they invited guest Ed Bauman along, and what he does is kind of cool. He takes professional songs, like I've done with Deer in the Headlights here, and he recreates them. He doesn't create covers of them, he creates recovers. And that will be explained more in the videos, but he emphasizes the ears. They're an invaluable tool you can use in your mixing, obviously, but he provides some tips and hints and some humor along with it to really get your feet wet into opening up possibilities. You hear a sound and he breaks it down into, okay, here's what you need to listen to, and at the end of this whole thing, you'll be able to separate a sound into, okay, you turn the cutoff here, you route this synthesizer part over to here, you fiddle with the EQ like this, and so forth to create that kind of sound. So this is quite a long episode. It's 2 hours long, cut into 1 hour sections for YouTube, but I highly recommend this. That is about it for me, and this will close this section of production tips. I thank you for joining me this far, and hope this has been very informative. I commend this to you, and I want to close with this thought, and that is this: good original music does not have a push button answer. And I mean, as a push button answer, I mean downloading MIDI files, using someone else's channel strip settings, project files, magic wands, presets. They are a good place to start, but they really aren't the core of good original music. Good original music comes with good patience, and it's built on real talent. And if you're willing to put in the time and invest both time and perhaps money in the process, I think you'll find it a very rewarding result. And you can do this too. I'd like to underline again, this doesn't happen overnight. It's a long process, and if you're patient with yourself and allow yourself time to learn, there is no telling what you can do. That'll conclude everything we have to do for Deer in the Headlights. It was wonderful being with you through this whole thing, and I look forward to teaching more as time goes on. I know I have plans for some other videos I'd like to do in the future, but if you have any suggestions or requests, I highly encourage you to email me at thefledglingmusic@gmail.com, or you can hit me up on Facebook under The Fledgling. I welcome your comments and suggestions there. Until next time, thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time.